hoping to catch the drivers putting us and them in danger. All new Speeding Wars is tomorrow night at 9. Time now for the news.
Cameron comes out fighting for his Chancellor as he tries to calm his party. After a turbulent weekend for the Tories, there was some praise for his former Work and Pensions Secretary, but a robust defence of George Osborne.
We will continue with this approach in full because we are a modern, compassionate, one-nation Conservative government.
There was also a big U-turn on the policy which prompted the crisis, so how does George Osborne get over this? Also on News at 10. The widow of PC Dave Phillips says she is living in hell as the teenager who killed him is convicted. After millions of pounds and countless allegations, the inquiry into a VIP paedophile ring collapses. And 40 years of service in our skies, the farewell flight of the Sea King.
This is ITV News at 10 with Julie Etchingham.
Good evening. The turmoil of the past 3 days has been by any standards a major crisis in David Cameron's premiership. And today he went to the Commons to try to take control and apply some much-needed balm. He defended his beleaguered Chancellor, singling out George Osborne's role in turning around the economy. And he tried to calm the acrimony stirred by Ian Duncan Smith's resignation, praising the achievements of his former Work and Pensions Secretary. But his critics weren't convinced. For one thing, with the U-turn on disability benefit cuts now officially confirmed, there is still a £4 billion hole in the budget.
The inseparable double act that's run Britain for almost 6 years. Cameron and Osborne, pilloried by Ian Duncan Smith, whose resignation over disability benefit cuts on Friday night has prompted the worst crisis they've faced and even raised questions about whether the Chancellor is fit to continue in office. So, after being accused by Duncan Smith of not caring enough about the poor, how did the Prime Minister respond?
My right honourable friend, the member for Chingford and Woodford Green, spent almost a decade campaigning for welfare reform and improving people's life chances. And he has spent the last 6 years implementing those policies in government. My right honourable friend contributed an enormous amount to the work of this government, and he can be proud of what he achieved.
So, in burying Duncan Smith, the Prime Minister praised him. But he wasn't having any of Duncan Smith's criticism that George Osborne puts too much stress on cutting the deficit and not enough on rational reform of welfare.
None of this would be possible if it wasn't for the actions of this government and the work of my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, in turning our economy around. So, securing our economy, extending opportunity. We will continue with this approach in full because we are a modern, compassionate, one-nation Conservative government, and I commend this statement to the House.
But Labour's leader tried not to show any compassion to the Chancellor.
The budget has a big hole in it. It's really up to the Prime Minister to persuade his great friend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, to either come here and explain how he's going to fill that hole, or perhaps he should consider his position and look for something else to do.
The Secretary of State for Work and Pensions.
And then came capitulation from Duncan Smith's successor. The disability cut has gone forever, he confirmed, and there'd be no other welfare cuts to fill a £1.3 billion a year hole in the budget caused by this U-turn of U-turns.
I am absolutely clear, Mr. Speaker, that a compassionate and fair welfare system should not just be about numbers. Behind every statistic, there is a human being. And perhaps sometimes in government we forget that.
Boris, who shares Duncan Smith's passion for the UK to leave the EU, does he think his friend was also right to leave government?
It would have been much better, quite frankly, if he'd stayed in and fought his point of view from within the cabinet.
Duncan Smith may have gone, but when it comes to that infamous disability cut, Cameron and Osborne have surrendered, and he seems to have won. Robert Peston, News at 10.
Well, George Osborne's budget had hit trouble before the resignation of Ian Duncan-Smith, and despite the disability benefits U-turn, it is still in some disarray tonight. There have been repeated calls by the opposition for his resignation and for a fresh budget. Even his former mentor, Lord Lawson, told News at 10 he was glad his budgets had never unravelled like this one.
The heir apparent, perhaps, but back in 2010, the Chancellor didn't exactly look like a leader in waiting.
Well, good morning, everyone. David Cameron has asked me to be the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Undoubtedly very clever, but awkward in front of the cameras. Since then, he's undergone quite a makeover, getting out and about more and sporting a new haircut and sharper suits. But has all that effort been for nothing? His disastrous 8th budget, possibly his last. One of his predecessors says he has been weakened.
As I say, I don't think he's in a particularly happy position, but you have to look at his record as a whole as Chancellor, and his record has been a good one. I'm very glad that none of my budgets had to were unravelled in that way.
How do backbenchers rate his chances now? Has he run out of road, in your opinion?
No, I don't think he's run out of road. I'm not one of those who are calling for the sacking of the Chancellor. I think that would be a disaster. But he's going to have to do some quite hard rethinking.
His fortunes as Chancellor have certainly ebbed and flowed. In 2012, his budget was dubbed an omni-shambles after he was forced to reverse the so-called pasty tax and other changes to VAT.
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
In the same year, he was booed at the Paralympics. And last year, he had to abandon cuts to tax credits, which would have saved £4 billion after the House of Lords voted to delay the measure.
Voted contents 289.
There was a time when many thought that all George Osborne would need to do to succeed David Cameron was, well, to move next door. He may still entertain such ambitions, but there's no doubt the fallout from last week's budget has been deeply damaging, dramatically reducing his chances of ever making it to number 10. So is the one-time front-runner now out of the running?
You know, who's going to be leader, who's going to be standing? These really are matters.
Do you think you've got a better chance now?
Well, I have no idea, and we're not even into any kind of vacancy at the moment. The Prime Minister, I think, is going to be there for quite a few more years yet.
Record employment there may be, and growth that many other countries envy. But the prospects of David Cameron's right-hand man taking over are receding. Libby Wiener, News at 10, Westminster.
Well, our political editor is here. Robert, amazing seeing those shots, seeing them so closely side by side, George Osborne and David Cameron. No sign of Osborne today. How did Cameron get on, do you think?
I think we're probably over what is the worst part of what's been an extraordinary crisis for Cameron and Osborne. The Prime Minister gave an assured performance in the Commons. Much depends, however, on how George Osborne performs himself in the Commons tomorrow. He's doing something very unusual, something that no Chancellor has done since the 1990s, which is to close the budget debate. But he has to come out of hiding. I mean, since this broke, and despite all the criticism being heaped on him, he has been invisible. But we should be clear that this has been one hell of an exposure of how weak they are. They have capitulated incredibly quickly on the policy that Ian Duncan-Smith was criticising. Extraordinary when you think these two people were being feted by their party just a few months ago for winning an unexpected victory in the general election. And I think it shows you how weak they feel in the face of a completely divided party over Europe.
Let's move to the other side of the House and what we witnessed there this afternoon, because there have been some distinct rumblings, I think, to put it politely this evening, from what you've heard, amongst Labour about Jeremy Corbyn this afternoon. Yes,
I've been talking to some of Jeremy Corbyn's colleagues, and I think you could say they are less than impressed with his performance in the Commons this afternoon, to put it mildly. They feel he let the Prime Minister off the hook. He didn't even mention Ian Duncan-Smith when criticising the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. They say the easy thing for him to do was simply throw Ian Duncan-Smith's words back at the Prime Minister, that criticism, savage criticism of Ian Duncan-Smith, that the Prime Minister doesn't care enough about the poor. He didn't say that. They feel he overstated his hand by calling so early in this process for the Chancellor to resign.
One MP said to me that's a sort of schoolboy tactic. You don't call for a resignation when you're not sure that the individual has been weakened sufficiently. So they are feeling that this is a massively lost opportunity. At the PLP this evening, only 10 or so MPs, Labour MPs, actually turned up to hear the leader and the Shadow Chancellor, which shows you, I think, something about their lack of authority in the parliamentary party at the moment, although we should point out that out there among Labour Party members, all the signs are that those members still like Jeremy Corbyn.
OK, Robert, for the moment, thank you. The words of the widow of PC Dave Phillips, the policeman killed by a teenage car thief, moved a court to tears today. Even her husband's killer bowed his head as Jen Phillips turned and told him how she is living in hell. 19-year-old Clayton Williams, who hit PC Phillips with a stolen pickup truck, was sentenced for 20 years for manslaughter.
He was proud to be a police officer, but his love was for his family. A family PC Dave Phillips left behind forever when he was run down and killed by teenage burglar Clayton Williams. Today, after seeing his killer jailed for 20 years, his widow Jen spoke of the man she loved, the man she wants everyone to remember.
From the start, I wanted everyone to see Dave for the man he is. Not just a police officer, but a loving husband, wonderful father, devoted son, protective brother, an all-round kind, genuine man.
Get off patrol, that was stop sticks, please. This is going round in circles.
The last moments of PC Phillips' life were captured by the dashboard camera of a police car, an officer asking for spiked stop-stick devices to halt a stolen truck, pursued from the scene of a burglary in Wallasey on Merseyside. That pursuit had continued for miles through residential streets at speeds touching 80 miles an hour.
6554 possession with a stop stick.
On the radio, the voice of PC 6554, Dave Phillips, announcing he was in position. The camera captures his silhouette crouching in the centre of the dual carriageway. Seconds later, he'd been knocked down at speed and was dying of catastrophic injuries. Jen Phillips today recalled the moment she sat by his hospital bed, hoping against hope he would survive.
Sat next to him, held his hand. Was quietly asking him to fight, saying, "Come on, Dave, do this for me, don't leave me." And then they timed it 3:15.
Today the jury decided that Clayton Williams had driven deliberately at PC Phillips and was guilty of manslaughter, but not murder. The life he took has been mourned ever since by the Phillips family, in public and in private, by children too young to know what's happened.
Sophie doesn't understand. She's 3. She doesn't. She occasionally says, "Where's Daddy? I want Daddy. Where's Daddy?" And we have to just say, "Daddy's a star now." And we go out occasionally at night and look up at the stars and say, you know, "Oh, there's Daddy up there."
Dave Phillips' family want the world to know that the man who died, whose funeral was attended by almost the whole of Merseyside police, was more than a uniform, more than a collar number. The people from whom he took a husband, a father, a brother, a son, say theirs is a life sentence. Damon Green, News at 10, Manchester Crown Court.
Now, it cost £2 million and dragged into its lurid spotlight politicians who'd served in high government office and the former chief of Britain's armed forces. But today, Operation Midland, the investigation into claims of a VIP paedophile ring, was dropped without a single arrest being made. The ex-Conservative MP Harvey Proctor was also told he faces no further action. He demanded a public inquiry.
It was an appalling story of young boys being driven to Westminster, to the Dolphin Square apartment block where many politicians lived, where the boys were abused and worse. It was a story the police believed. 17 months on, no evidence, no prosecutions. Operation Midland has been closed, but no apology for those under suspicion.
I regret any distress that is caused to any individual. Of course I do. But the Met can't apologise for investigating serious allegations.
Operation Midland was launched in October 2014, based on allegations made by one witness known only as Nick. Nick alleged that between 1975 and 84, he and other boys were sexually abused by a VIP paedophile ring at various locations around London and the home counties, including a flat in Westminster's Dolphin Square. He also claimed that the powerful group was responsible for the murder of 3 young boys. Former Tory MP Harvey Proctor was one of those